Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Bachelor's Degree Program, Elective Course, Rural Development, BRD 101 Rural Development, Indian Context, Block-2 Rural Development, Unit 2 Rural Development, Approaches and Process. 2.0 Aims and Objectives. This unit presents various conceptual foundations of rural development with discussion of its necessity as well as its approaches and processes adopted by different countries. The study of this unit will enable you to understand the forthcoming problems emerging from our existing socio-economic structure in rural areas. After reading of this unit, you will be able to understand the concept and meaning of rural development. Explain various approaches the strategies adopted for rural development. Understand various strategies of rural development adopted by different international agencies, and justifying the needs of rural development in Asian perspectives. 2.1 Introduction. In previous unit we have learned the nature, meaning and prerequisites of development. In this unit efforts will be made to acquaint you with the meaning, approaches and processes of rural development. The process of rural development is not only the concern of India, rather it is a worldwide phenomenon. It may be possible that the approaches and strategies for rural development may differ from one country to another. Very often it happens to suit the requirements of the socio-cultural setup of the specific society. The glaring socio-economic inequality in rural areas and the predominance of the rural economy in our country must be nagging us to ask further questions. In this unit attempts will be made to familiarize you with important factors of rural development. 2.3 Rural Development. Rural development in simple term may be regarded as the scheme of development for rural, not urban, areas. It may be broadly defined as a process aimed at the well-being of people, particularly those living outside the urbanized areas through forward and backward linkages between the rural and urban sector. Tyler, 1975. The World Bank has defined rural development as a strategy to improve the economic and social life of a specific group of people, the rural poor. This notion has two implied assumptions. First, that the existing village communities are viable units to sustain concentration of planned development for socio-economic transformation, and second, that the administrative and other infrastructure for it need to be provided in the context of larger territorial areas. The term rural development has been used in different ways and in vastly different contexts. Now let us try to understand rural development as I. A concept, 2. A phenomenon, 3. A strategy. As a concept, rural development means all-round development of rural areas with a view to betterment of the lifestyles of rural people. In this sense, rural development, like development in general, is multidimensional. In purely economic sense, it covers development of the agricultural and allied activities and social facilities, besides development of the human resources in the rural areas. As a phenomenon, it is the result of interactions between various physical, environmental, technological, economic, socio-cultural and institutional factors in the rural areas of a nation. As a strategy, the rural development is the approach or operational design to bring about the desired positive change in the socio-economic and cultural life of the rural people. A typical rural development strategy has been defined as one that achieves desired increase in farm output at minimum costs, makes possible widespread improvements in the welfare of the rural population, contributes to the transformation of a predominant agrarian economy, and facilitates a broader process of social modernization. 2.4 Need for rural development. There are certain reasons and basic issues which have prompted special attention of the government and planners toward rural development. Some of them are following. I. The most important reason to initiate rural development is that the majority of the nation's population lives in rural areas and depends on agriculture and allied. Page No. 20 to 23 missing. 2.8 Rural development and international agencies. International agencies like the UN, World Bank, etc. in recent years have been actively contributing and participating in rural development programs of developing countries. However, these agencies have their own strategies to rural development. Let us look at the assumptions and approaches of some of these agencies. I. World Bank Functional Coordination Strategy. The World Bank is the largest single source of external funds for rural development. In developing countries, the World Bank has the following basic assumptions concerning rural development. First, the rate of transition from low productivity agriculture and related activities to more remunerative occupations in rural areas has been very slow. Second, the mass of people in the rural areas face varying degrees of poverty. Third, rural areas have labor, land and at least some capital which, if mobilized, could reduce poverty and improve the quality of life. Based on these assumptions, the World Bank proposes 3 strategies of rural development to suit the specific situations of the developing countries. These are as following. I. The minimum package approach, coordinated in a single project where technical, administrative, financial and institutional inputs, infrastructure and technology are organized to raise agricultural production. 2. The comprehensive approach, which attempts to improve the productivity of selected crops throughout a country or to deliver financial and technical assistance to selected regions where the productivity of a range of commodities can be increased. In both cases, functional inputs are coordinated by a special authority or government agency at the national level, and emphasis is placed on creating community or cooperative organizations to deliver the services. 3. The sector or special program approach, which provides single services such as public works, health, education, etc. This kind of program may be nationwide in its coverage. The World Bank, however, admit that no single package or formula is likely to be either necessary or sufficient for effective rural development. 2. United Nations, UN, Rural Modernization Strategy. The UN strategy is based on 4 major assumptions regarding rural development problems of developing countries. These are as following. I. It is based on the increasing gap in income between agricultural and non-agricultural sectors. The argument is that the gap will widen and continue to be primary cause of rural-urban migration. 2. The promotion of agricultural productivity, technological innovations, and modernizing rural social and economic structures will help in reducing the gap substantially. 3. Modern production techniques will increase agricultural output sufficiently to match with controlled population growth. Finally, rural social and economic structures can be modernized through coordinated investment in services, facilities, infrastructure and technology. Thus, you will notice that the UN strategy of rural modernization is conceived as a means of achieving rural-urban integration. The main focus, however, is on farm development. 3. Asian Development Bank, ADB, Rural Investment Strategy. The ADB lately has become one of the leading institutions sponsoring several rural development programs in the Asia-Pacific region. The problems of rural development as identified by the ADB are as following. I. Widespread underemployment and poverty among rural population. 2. Unsatisfactory performance of agricultural production and distribution system. 3. Poor implementation capabilities of the government machinery both at the national and grassroots level to meet the development tasks. The ADB's involvement in the rural development activities, therefore, is guided by a 5-point principle. These are as following. 1. Basic human need oriented. 2. Participative. 3. Economically integrative. 4. Environmentally sustainable, and 5. Cost-effective or cost-reducing. In the preceding text we have acquainted you with comprehensive design and implementation of some of the strategies of rural development adopted by international organizations. Despite this, only few countries have attained success. Now we will discuss the experience of some of the Asian countries. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU. 2.9 Rural Development, an Asian Perspective. From second half of the 20th century, Asian countries have given varying degrees of attention and priority to rural development. However, in these countries the motivations and objectives of public policies have witnessed changes with passage of time. Major factors responsible for such a shift in these countries were their complex combination of political, economic and social factors, and the opportunities for development provided by foreign assistance and global economic trends. Nevertheless, you can witness some uniformities in the rural development policies of some, especially South Asian countries. It is due to the similarities in their social and cultural milieu and a shared legacy of their colonial past, which included institutions of governance and an agrarian structure suited to the needs of the colonial rulers. The objectives of rural development and their implementations by the various governments have also been influenced by the overall plans for development of the country and the performance of their economy in its global setting during the period. In particular, they have been conditioned by the international economic order and environment. Especially for foreign assistance. Rural development is not an issue only for our country. Some of our neighboring countries, Bangladesh, China and Sri Lanka, have also confronted with the task of development programs for the rural poor. It will be interesting to note their experiences in this regard. The culture, the geography and the political setup of one country differ from another. There are differences in the nature and severity of the problems faced by these countries. Consequently, the way to remove the problems differs from one country to another. There are variations in the identification of priorities, objectives, planning and implementations of various programs. Now efforts will be made to acquaint you with rural development programs launched by some Asian countries. The major programs initiated in these countries are as following. 2nd September 2001 Rural Development in Bangladesh. Programs. Some major programs of rural development initiated by Bangladesh are as following. I. Village Agricultural and Industrial Development Program, VAID. 1. Of the pioneering program for rural development started in Bangladesh is WIDE. This program aimed at the alleviation of rural poverty and increase in productivity in the agricultural sector. This program, however, failed to achieve the goals it had set. 2. Kamila Model of Rural Development. The experiments conducted at Bangladesh Academy of Rural Development resulted in what is known as the Kamila Model of Rural Development in the late 50s and during the 60s. This program included rural public works, pump irrigation, and the cooperative credit organizations. This program had many achievements to its credit. One of the main achievements is being the establishment of cooperative credit institutions. The Kamila model was successful in increasing agricultural production through promotion of new technologies, mobilizing rural savings into credit institutions, federating village-level credit institutions into a larger structure, and creating institutions of rural change that included small and middle farmers. These two programs were started when Bangladesh was still a part of Pakistan. 3. Integrated Rural Development Program, IRDP. Following the success of the experiment at Kamila, the new Integrated Rural Development Program, IRDP, was evolved. This program covers 250 thanas. 4. Food for Work Program, FWP. In 1970s Bangladesh received large quantities of food aid from the developed countries. Food for Work Program, FWP, was thus initiated in the mid-70s aiming at the creation of rural infrastructure facilities such as roads, bridges, drainage and irrigation canals, and local administrative buildings. Provision of employment of rural poor during the dry season when agricultural employment was seriously limited was another objective of this program. While laborers employed in RWP are paid in cash, those employed under FWP received their wages as food grains. 5. Microcredit programs. The access to credit by the poor in Bangladesh has been recognized as one of the main causes of rural poverty. Since formal read it. Institutions require tangible assets, such as land, as collateral for receiving loans. The only access to credit for the poor is the informal sector, group-based lending. Programs have recently become popular and have taken a quantum leap since the success of the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which inspired the microcredit revolution in South Asia with the establishment of the Grameen Bank under the pioneering leadership of Muhammad Yunus, has two other microcredit programs, the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, BRAC, and the Bangladesh Rural Development Board's Rural Development Program, which engage in a variety of other developmental activities. A UN study, UNPI, UNOPSI APDC 1996, on the outreach of 39 microfinance institutions programs in 12 countries of Asia found that they covered a total of 5.1 million households. Of this, about 4.5 million households were in Bangladesh, and only 0.6 million households in the rest of the region. 2 September 2002 Rural development in China. China is one of the Asian countries which has made rapid progress in all aspects of its economy, particularly rural development. Therefore, Chinese experiment is highly relevant to other developing countries. Chinese development was preceded by revolutionary transformation of the political structure, and the establishment of a communist society. The rural development strategies and programs which have been followed in China are diverse in nature. The approaches followed differ from other countries. Some of its important features are as following. Educational reform. Educational reform is the first major step taken in China for rural development. The main objective of the education movement was raising the educational levels of Chinese peasants to raise productivity and ultimately the welfare of the peasant. The policies on rural education have been deployed at three levels, viz., basic literacy, primary, secondary and vocational education, and the training for science and research. As a result, China has not only achieved high literacy rate but education has been made more relevant and useful for creating awareness among the masses. Land reforms and modernization of agriculture. Collectivization, self-reliance, equity and modernization of agriculture were the main pillars holding the land reform pattern in China. These were some of the steps taken for land reforms. Times transfer of land ownership. The first step in this direction was the transfer of land ownership from landlords to poor peasants and tenants. This was followed by the establishment of mutual aid teams, MAT. Generally, a team consisted of about 10 households and they pooled resources, mainly labor, draught animals, and farm implements, owned by individual households for joint agricultural activities. Though originally formed as ad hoc bodies, gradually they were made organizations of longer duration. Times agricultural production cooperatives, APC mutual aid teams, MATs, gradually evolved into agricultural production cooperatives, APC, which, in the first stage, involved pooling of land and other means of production for collective use, but members holding their property as shares received dividends on the basis of their shares. Abolition of private ownership. Subsequently, APCs became much larger in size, with about 60 to 100 households as members, and it became the owner of land and other means of production. Private ownership was restricted to small plots of household land for vegetables, poultry, domestic animals, etc. The draught animals, large farm tools and implements of the members which were turned over to the collectives were paid compensation. Times commune system. Thus collectivization progressed rapidly, and by 1956 there were at least 20,000 advanced apes. Their success in achieving increased productivity and surpluses led to communalization of the society in 1958. An average commune included about 5,000 households that meant to become a self-sufficient unit combining political, social, economic and cultural functions. With this, Experiments, collective living and ownership of the means of production by the whole people got underway. 2nd September 2003 Rural development in Sri Lanka. Major schemes introduced for rural development in Sri Lanka are as following. Dry zone development. This scheme was undertaken through the restoration and construction of minor and major irrigation works and the leasing of crown land to the peasantry. This was continued by the initiation of Mahoele project, which was the most ambitious and comprehensive program of development undertaken by the UNP in the late 1960s and nurtured by the SLFP later on. Under this project, the water from the Mahoele Ganga system was diverted to dry zone areas for irrigation and agricultural production. Rural credit. It was realized that rural credit is necessary for rural economic diversification, for the spreading of progressive farm technology and for general rural rehabilitation. Expansion of institutional credit for agricultural production purpose was expanded to relieve the small farmers in particular from the high interest rates levied by the money lenders. Divisional Development Council Scheme, DDC. Since the early efforts for rural development did not significantly improve the living standard of the masses, the government adopted a different strategy. In the year 1970, the Ministry of Managing and Economic Affairs established a separate division, called the Regional Development Division, RDD, to work out an approach for rural development. The philosophy behind it was to introduce local planning in restricted areas so that local resources, skills and knowledge could be harnessed locally for the economic development of the area itself. Based on the commendations of Regional Development Division, the Divisional Development Council was set up consisting of people's representatives from organizations such as the Village Committee, Rural Development Society, Cultivation Committee, Women's Committees and cooperative societies. The DDC also functions at the district level. The DDC started the integrated rural project initially in 3 districts. Check your progress too. Note: I. Give your answer in the space given below for each question. 2. Check your answer with the preceding text. I. What are main features of the land reform pattern in China? 2. Describe microcredit programs of Bangladesh. 2.10 Let us some UP. In this unit efforts have been made to acquaint learners with the meaning, needs, strategies and typology of rural development. This unit emphasized the strategies of international agencies with their programs launched for the purpose of rural development. In the process, we have discussed the developmental initiatives of some Asian countries, i.e., Bangladesh, China and Sri Lanka. However, in this unit, the emphasis is on the programs of rural development in these countries. Thanks. We will see you in the next video.